Hello, welcome to the Love Talk. So this Love Talk will be in several different sections so that after each section you can stop and talk about it, answer the questions before you go on to the next. So first thing we need to do is define what love is. And as you know, for all of you who have read our first lecture in this class, love is not a feeling when we're talking about what true love is. It's a state of being. So coming from a place of love means it's something that comes from within you and it extends out to a partner, your kids, this paper. Well, you don't really have to love this paper, but if you're in a state of love, then you're not coming from a place of opposition to anyone or anything. So living in a state of love all the time is something that few people actually do because we have egos. And when I'm telling you about the ego, which you already know a little bit about from your lectures, the ego isn't how most people think of it. The ego represents everything that you associate with your identity. So the ego is a separate sense of self. When you're in a state of love, you're coming from what you could call your true self, and that has no identity in it. So me coming from the state of love, even though I might act differently than you, we're coming from the same place. So it's the same in everybody coming from a state of love, and egos are different in everybody. Obviously, we all have different identities, different personalities, different ways we look, talk, act, feel, all of that. That all comprises your ego. And the problem with the ego is that the ego identity is determined to protect itself and to stay separate from others. So have you ever thought about how almost everyone thinks they're right when they're in an argument or the way that they look at things? And we all have opinions about things. So the ego self will say, well, I have this opinion and it's right. And so I'll find other people that agree with me. And then people that don't agree with me, I'll consider wrong. So the ego is all about right or wrong. It's about judgment. And not only does the ego judge other people, it judges ourselves. So since our ego identity is not really a real thing, because you're always changing. People change. I mean, even people who don't change in terms of, you know, you hear people say, oh, he'll never change. He's always going to be a jerk or whatever. You still change over time. I mean, our bodies change. The way we look changes. The way we talk. Things do change. So there's no set identity. There's no set personality. But the ego tries to create one and tries to hold on to it. And so coming from the ego, you really can't come from love because the ego is inherently selfish. It just has to be. So even when you're in a relationship and you really feel like you love someone, you still want that person to be a certain way for you to love them, whether it's kids or a partner. And we will talk about that more later. But before we talk about relationships, let's still talk about just love in general. So you have a true self that is filled with love, and this is something that everybody has, and you don't have to just believe me on these things. I don't expect you to just believe me. Test it out for yourself. You learn these things through experiencing them. So I'm sure all of you have had periods of time or instances where you just feel at peace. So there's nothing that you're worried about or nothing that you're opposed to. You're just in the moment enjoying life. That's the same as coming from a place of love. It's not rooted in any kind of thoughts. There's no right or wrong in it. It just is. So when we talk about love, it's just that state of peace that isn't opposed to anything and that welcomes whatever experience we're having. And most of us are opposed to what's happening a lot. And we will also talk about that, especially during a pandemic. So love doesn't have any opposition. And we know from some of the great teachers, and it doesn't matter what religion you are, because this covers any religion. So in every religion, there is a belief in love and a state of being at peace and of acceptance. So if we look at the example of Jesus or Buddha or some of the great teachers and leaders that we've had, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, you see people who are coming from a state of love and who promote unity rather than division. And that's very threatening for the ego. And we also have a collective ego. So what that means is, as a society, as a community, we have a set identity within that. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you don't make your identity right and other people's wrong. That's what happens with countries. Why is there war? One country is fighting another country, or the same country's fighting for resources. So the ego wants to win, whether it's an argument, a war, control of the remote control. It's wanting to win. So what we want to look at is you want to be able to see your ego and know when you're in it, because that means you can step out of it and kind of watch it, because it's not who you really are. There's something else deeper than that. And I invite you to experience it. So that will be one of your first questions, is to notice when you have been in a state of love and what has created that. A lot of people, when they have a baby, they feel this tremendous love state. And that is being in a state of love, although if it goes away when the baby gets older and starts saying no, then they've lost that state of love. So it doesn't mean that they don't still love their child. It's just that to stay in that state of love, you accept when other people aren't doing what you like. And you still are coming from a place of love, which means that you would never be cruel, critical, unkind. Because in a state of love, you just can't. You just don't want to. So that's what I'm saying about most people don't stay there. Because anger comes from the ego. Anger is saying, I'm right, you're wrong, no matter what it is. If you're angry, you're fighting against another person or some situation that's happened. You're in traffic and you're angry. Or you have a professor that gives you a bunch of work and you're angry. Of course, it wouldn't be toward me because I'm very respectful of your time. Try not to pile on too much work. So the ego is angry. It also projects. So projection is, I feel bad about myself. I can't tolerate it. No one can tolerate really feeling like I'm a piece of doo-doo. So what we do with that is we project it out onto other people. So the ego will necessarily also blame other people. So, you know, when you wake up in just a bad mood and you're just like, God, I don't know, something's just not right. And then it feels like stuff just keeps happening. You spill your coffee and then you're late to class or a Zoom meeting, as the case may be. And, you know, things just keep seeming to go wrong. Well, that's because you're feeling bad and then you're projecting it out, and then that energy is going out, and that's what you're getting back. So when you're in a state of love, it doesn't mean those things happen or don't happen. They still happen. You still might spill your coffee. It's just if you're not fighting against reality, it doesn't then start this chain of events of, oh my God, this is a horrible day. And then it doesn't just keep continuing. You're able to turn that around by accepting what's happening. So accepting what's happening doesn't mean that you stay with abuse, which we will talk about with relationships. It means that you learn, if you don't like something, that you can have boundaries, you can make changes to get out of situations that you don't like, but you don't stay in the situation and just be pissed off about it. If you're in traffic, you can't get out of it, okay, then you work toward just accepting it. You don't have to like it to accept it, but it means you're not blaming anybody for it. You're just accepting, you know, shit happens. So, okay, what else do we need to talk about? Fear. So the ego is very fear-based because it's afraid of losing its identity, death. It's pretty much afraid most of the time. So this is something that you can also notice, just the things that you're afraid of. And it's all tied up in some sense of loss of control, loss of your health, loss of a relationship, jealousy, all of that is coming from a place of fear. So in the state of love, there is no fear because you're just in the moment. What can go wrong? I'm just here leaving a video for you. What could go wrong? Well, things could happen. My dogs could start barking. My son could come home and this video could get disrupted. So I may suddenly turn it off and I'll start a new one. But in this moment, everything's fine. So in a state of love, there is no fear. Okay, so what we are going to work on in this class is understanding the importance of recognizing how to be in a state of love, the importance of nurturing that part of yourself. Because whether you believe in love or not, you can call it what you want. You can call it peace. I don't know anybody that doesn't want to live in a place of peace or joy. I mean, all the things that we do, any illegal activity, drugs or stealing or hurting someone else, it's all because we're trying to get something that we think is going to make us happy. So the ego always wants, and I'm not saying that most people are going to go do illegal things to be happy, but the goal, whether you're doing things that are really horrible or you're just living a nice, pretty decent life, you're still going to be coming from a place of selfishness if you're coming from your ego. And coming from a state of love does not mean that you let people walk on you. Please don't. It just means that when you are with other people, you're able to still be loving, even when you're not agreeing with them, even when you need to leave a relationship, even when someone's abusing you, because you have also love for yourself. And you go, hey, this isn't okay. This person is not okay for me to be around because they're coming from their ego. They're afraid and they're taking their fear out of me. They're afraid of losing control. They're afraid of not having control over you, a situation. Maybe they're just feeling really horrible about their life. So when they're in that state of fear, then they may hurt you. And your job is then to get out. All right. That concludes part 1. Be back with you for part 2.